Welcome to Graphic Policy Radio. This is your host, Ilana Levin, and this is a comics podcast. But today we're bringing you a very special episode of the Venture Brothers podcast. We know that fans of the Venture Brothers show have really come to be regulars and listeners on Graphic Policy Radio. And I have been extraordinarily busy right now with the conference that I run and have not been able to get all of my interviews with comics writers together. Plus, COVID is happening. So I decided this was an opportunity to just do something a little bit special and fun and do a throwback episode. My co-host Stephen Attenwell and I began covering the Venture Brothers show in season 6 because it was when the show moved to New York. And so we never got to cover any of the earlier episodes. I asked folks what old episodes should we do, and the verdict was pretty strong. The answer was you guys wanted us to cover Operation P.R.O.M from season 4. That's season 4, episode 16. And joining me today is Stephen Attenwell. He writes People's History of the Marvel Universe for Graphic Policy and also writes Race for the Iron Throne for all you A Song of Ice and Fire fans. In his day job, he teaches public policy at CUNY's School of Labor and Urban Studies, who are actually also co-sponsoring my conference, Organizing 2.0. That'll take place entirely online, April 17th and 18th. So, because this is an older episode, I decided to break my usual rule of absolutely no recaps. Just use the internet, asshole, if you need a recap rule. What I've decided we're going to do instead is, rather than doing a just look at the Wikipedia kind of recap, we're going to give you a short synopsis while also using those moments through the synopsis to reflect on the references that we see. So this is sort of a hybrid between recap and your annotated episode type experience. And then after that, we're going to talk about some of the broader themes and some of the references that didn't quite make sense to just plop in the middle of the synopsis. It's an experiment. Tell us what you think.
So, the episode opens very much like the opening of a movie, with credits over the action, introducing the characters. Feels very much like sort of World War II action films, The Dirty Dozen, Guns of Navarone, that kind of thing.
Love that movie. It's so good.
Leading the operation is Dr. Venture, who is organizing, quote, the best goddamn homeschool prom $500 will buy, with the help of the Order of the Triad, which consists of Dr. Orpheus,
our Doctor Strange / Vincent Price / Dad,
Jefferson Twilight,
our Blackula Hunter / Blade from the Marvel Comics,
and the Alchemist,
our Dana Snyder. I love that voice actor. He's so much fun.
In addition, we have Conjectural Technologies, Billy Quizboy and Pete White,
a quizboy and your college radio DJ,
and his bodyguard, Sergeant Vatrid,
in his first appearance with a V, not an H on his forehead,
and Brock Sampson.
You know him.
Supposedly, in order to help his sons have a better prom than the one that he had, Dr. Venture then hires a number of sex workers. Later in the evening, when he strikes out with one of the ladies by offering her a rusty venture, which turns out to be an UrbanDictionary.com style sex act, he ends up mixing up a batch of genetically mutated and ethically problematic Spanish fly that ends up diffusing and then creating a crisis as the party reaches midnight. While being driven around by Brock in a bulletproof limousine, Hank and Dean attempt to get dates for the prom. Dean is dismayed to find out that Triana has a boyfriend and is only going out with him as a friend.
I'm going to say that Triana's dress was disappointing. I had a goth prom dress, and that was not a goth prom dress. And this is a show that does such a good job with costumes that I was really looking forward to it being a really cool outfit. So I was a little bit bummed about that opportunity because these guys really know costuming and know goth stuff. I do like her flower crown though. And the other fun thing in that moment is we get to see Triana's mom, who's basically just a vampira, which also means that Triana is a second generation goth.
Meanwhile, Hank strikes out with his attempt to pick up the Venture Compound's much older mail carrier,
but decides to bring Dermot along instead so that his band, Shallow Gravy, can play their first gig. So this is their rock band with Helper, and Helper is basically like a percussion / Casio keyboard drum beat, and they're just such a perfectly accurate, awkward 15-year-old band. That's just what they do.
Yeah.
Also, their name is a pun. Can you tell? Wow.
Dean then spirals further when he mistakes Triana's time on Urban Dictionary with her having been extremely sexually active with her boyfriend, causing him to have an age-regressed screaming argument with Triana that results in her leaving the prom.
Yeah, he literally screams like poo-poo and pee-pee, and it's all very embarrassing.
Yeah, it's not even like a good screaming argument. Hank and Dermot then decide to help Dean win Triana back, a la the John Hughes movie Say Anything, but it all takes an unfortunate clannish direction due to some miscommunication.
And poorly applied lighter fluid.
The Outrider offers Dean some advice about moving on, but Dean isn't having any of it, and finally utters his first adult swear.
That's like a big moment. I'm really interested in that. The Outrider, of course, is her Triana's mom's boyfriend. I think he looks like the Phantom Stranger from DC Comics. And like the Phantom Stranger, he gives you life advice while being spooky. And how helpful it is debatable.
Meanwhile, Henchman 21 infiltrates the Venture compound, having given up on his quest to solve the murder of Henchman 24, and winds up getting shot in the chest by Shore Leave.
Your shipwreck from G.I. Joe, but like deliberately gay this time.
Which leads to him helping Sphinx.
Which is like Cobra, but more fun to say. Sphinx.
Sphinx. On a mission, becoming one of the guests at Hank and Dean's prom, and eventually quitting on the Monarch when it turns out that he and Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch are too kinky for him.
So apparently cheating on your friend is okay, but your friends having an open relationship isn't okay if you're 21. That just made me respect him a lot less.
Yeah, he's, when you're kidnapped at age 11 and grow up in an all-male, mostly geek environment, sadly, you don't always come out with incredibly enlightened views about sexuality. Over at Sphinx, Colonel Hunter Gathers prepares for an awkward high school reunion-esque meeting at the OSI's hover quarters.
So the hover quarters is S.H.I.E.L.D.'s helicarrier. I know it featured prominently in the MCU movies, so people probably are all aware of it now. But it's basically this gigantic, too large to exist in real life, aircraft carrier that's also a helicopter. Some of the early art drawings of it are fucking amazing, so you should go and look at some of the helicarrier art from the 70s.
Yeah, especially like the Steranko stuff.
Steranko, everything Jim Steranko does is gorgeous.
After reaching a wrestling-based detente with her old boss, General Traister, Traister flies into a rage and Gathers is knocked unconscious, waking up to find that Traister is supposedly a...
Red Hulk? So, look, you've heard of your Hulks. In the comics, the ongoing nemesis of the Incredible Hulk is General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, who's also the father of his love interest, of course. And he gets so upset with the Hulk that he becomes that which he hates. He injects himself with some Hulk serum or whatever the hell, and he becomes the Red Hulk. He also has a mustache and is also the Red Hulk in space at various points. So it makes a lot of sense that General Traister would end up being the Red Hulk in space with a mustache.
However, Agents Doe and Cardholder tell Gathers that this was all just a ruse to cover for Traister's cancer and mental decline, but Gathers realizes that the two agents are actually the guild moles inside OSI that he had come there to warn Traister about. After being captured, Gathers is escorted to the secret bridge of the hover quarters.
I love that the hover quarters has a secret bridge because that implies that there are people who are assigned to working on a fake bridge that isn't the real bridge. So it's so silly. Like the idea that you would have all these people whose job it is to pretend that they're running the bridge of the helicarrier and it's not even the real one. And then the real one has a ship's steering wheel drawing it. It's very fanciful and ridiculous.
Yeah, I was going to say it's sort of a perfect metaphor for the kind of over the top, cloak and dagger shenanigans that Hammer and Public love to write.
Yeah, exactly.
So Traister reveals that an OSI plant inside of Sphinx had used the Monstroso operation to flush out Doe and Cardholder, who are promptly arrested.
Traister decides to shoot himself into space so that aliens can cure his cancer, leaving Gathers in command of OSI.
After running his prom errands, Brock Samson sneaks off with one of the sex workers that Doc hired, only to be shot in the back by a Sphinx frogman who turns out to be Molotov cocktease.
Our Black Widow and Brock's personal femme fatale.
Who had been waiting for Sphinx to be distracted so that she could extract the real Monstroso from captivity. The two engage in a limo versus motorcycle cliffside high-speed chase that ends with Molotov's limo dangling halfway off a cliff, a la The Italian Job.
I love that movie.
Yes, one of the best. Brock takes the opportunity to have it out with her, claiming that the two of them could never work as a couple because Molotov is a cold-hearted mercenary who cares for nothing save money. She retorts that she is acting out of love, having fallen in love with Monstroso after she realized that their shared bad guy natures make the two of them more compatible than she and Brock ever could be.
She gives him her Soviet chastity belt as a dramatic moment. That had been such a, I guess, iconic costume element for her character.
Yeah. Brock is furious to find this out and threatens to arrest the pair of them, but Molotov reveals her ace in the hole. The sex workers that Doc hired are actually her Blackheart assassins and will kill everyone at the prom at midnight unless she sends an abort code.
So them being the Blackhearts, that's a reference to Joan Jett of the Runaways backing band when she went solo, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. The band is flawless. You should definitely go listen to them. This is like badass women rock and roll.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Yay.
So Brock threatens to kill Monstroso to force her hand, but Molotov seemingly chooses suicide instead by popping the hood release on the limousine, sending it flying off the cliff into a fiery explosion.
With 2 minutes to midnight. Wow. I mean, I'm sorry. You can't, like, quote Iron Maiden and expect me not to sing it. Brock races on motorcycle and foot to rescue his friends, only to find Doc's Spanish fly has caused everyone to bliss out, avoiding violence, until the Blackhearts turn into actual flies, like from The Fly, and start menacing the guests. Finally, at peace with the world, Brock draws his knife and smiles. He gets ready to do some violence.
And interestingly, Public and Hammer weren't sure if the show would get continued after season 4. So this episode is very much an attempt at a series finale, as well as a season finale.
Man, that would have been a really unsatisfying series finale.
I mean, it's certainly a very Brock-centric series finale.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's why it wouldn't have felt good. I mean, Christ, as we approach what we assume must be the series finale in the near future, I mean, it makes me think about, like, what do we really want from it? Which I think would be, I don't know. What would you look for in a series finale for the Venture Brothers?
Yeah, it depends on kind of who we take as the focal point. It definitely feels like, especially like season 4 felt very much like the apogee of Brock's time as like the breakout character. Mm-hmm. And like, especially seasons 6 and 7 felt much more focused on
the boys, yeah.
The boys, and to a lesser extent, Doc and the Monarch as
very much
another pair of Venture Brothers, like making it more about that conceit. So shall we move on to talk about themes?
Yes.
So the first theme that we thought we'd talk about, which is very appropriate, given, this is all about a prom, is the theme of romantic failure. And there's a lot of different examples throughout the episode. We can start with, Dean's sort of failed friend date with Triana. He makes up a fake girlfriend. He gets kind of incel-y towards the end.
Yeah. I mean, I have to wonder, like, did Triana tell him beforehand that they were going as friends and that she had a boyfriend? Because she should have, right? And I can't tell if that happened or not. It's totally fine to go to prom with a friend. I went to prom with a friend, but like, you have to actually have conversation about that decision, and it's not something you would just pop on people. But by the same token, like,
yeah,
Dean
and
is being a douche.
Dean is very capable of like self, delusion. So I think it was more that just he hadn't expected Raven to be there, and I think he thought that like the romantic nature of prom would like win her back. Because a big part of the reason why Triana left living at the Venture compound is that like she had a vision of her future with Dean and was like noped out of it.
Oh my god, I forgot that. What episode was that even?
I don't remember. It's the one where she goes inside her, like she masters her fear and goes inside her closet and meets her father's like mystical mentor.
Wow, I have to rewatch that. I'm interested in that. I mean, obviously, like, she's a million years more mature than him, so that was never going to be a thing. But but Hank trying to date the mail carrier is like, this is because she is the only woman who he witnesses ever, and he doesn't know how to distinguish one kind of attention from another.
Yeah, he tends to have this sort of, like imprinting on women in the vicinity a lot. We see this like next season when he gets romantically linked to Dermot's mother, just because like she's there, she's a woman. Also, the Quim twins told him to stop calling them, so like that option is sort of taken out. Likewise, we learn that Triana's friend Kim is no longer a goth.
Mm-hmm. I know, she went preppy and she's born again, and like, fuck that. What a disappointing. You don't have... Look, I mean, Alice Cooper is sober and born again, and he is still Alice Cooper.
I wanted to throw in one thing, which is, which I think ties in kind of the Dean Hank thing, which is when Triana just leaves the prom, she tells Dean, "You're not acting like a friend, you're acting like an asshole," which I think like really gets at that whole thing of, like the capital N, capital G nice guy of like, being friends when you're not actually friends, or like pretending that you're a friend when you're not actually a friend. Whereas, Hank in the episode, like, actually decides to prioritize being a friend.
Yeah, that's real.
Speaking of romantic failure, the older generation is sort of hip deep in that. Turns out that Billy's prom date was his mom. And Rusty's prom date was supposed to be Linda Lovelace.
Deep throat making me feel warm all over. Deep throat sending a chill up my spine. You know, from the soundtrack of Deep Throat. Yeah, it's like the big breakout porn movie of the era. It's interesting. That definitely puts a date on his youth, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was supposed to be in college in like the, sort of late 70s, right?
Yeah. So I guess I gotta see, at what point did Linda Lovelace stop working in pornography and become a born again?
Anti-porn activist.
Yeah. And an anti-porn crusader,
and
yes.
he ended up going out with, instead, Andrea Dworkin.
Okay. Andrea Dworkin is pop culture's least favorite feminist philosopher, predominantly because she's known for her anti-porn and anti-sex worker crusade. If you've heard of pro-sex feminism, it was a reaction against her and also against Ronald Reagan and all of his backlash. As much as I've literally written essays in opposition to Andrea Dworkin's philosophy, I don't like her being used as a punchline in this way. It just sort of feels sloppy and also maybe a little bit like a fat joke or something. It's sort of,
I don't know. Effectively, you have two anti-porn activists, but one of them used to be a porn star and the other one didn't. So,
did not.
But, adding to that sort of like, complex that Rusty has going on, Rusty's dad brought 10 Dallas cheerleaders to his prom, which is just like, especially in the context of the 1970s, like this enormous Freudian moment.
That's 10. Like, what do you even do with 10 people on a date? That's not a thing.
Like Hugh Hefner performative sexuality as opposed to like actual, poly.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, like, Rusty kind of carries this forward when not only does he try to hire sex workers who are supposedly for his sons, which is creepy, but, actually for him. And...
yeah. He wants one of them to dress like Hawk Girl.
Well,
I appreciate the
specifically Billy
specificity
Quizboy
of that.
wants that. He just kind of goes along with it.
Oh, right. Sorry, Billy Quizboy wants her to look like Hawk Girl.
Yeah,
Share a hall, I guess.
Rusty, on the other hand, is too cheap to be a good, a conscientious patron, and decides to go with, 2 half-service and 4 goodnight kisses, which is just, like, that's just sad.
He's bad at everything he does, including like literally purchasing services. Like, he's not capable of doing that in a decent way.
I guess a slightly like better example of like relationship dynamics is that Sergeant Vatrid and Princess Tinyfoot reconcile with the help of the Monarch and Dr. Mrs. the Monarch.
Do we know that, though? Like, I feel like she's just in his proximity, and we have to go by other word that she wanted to be tied up in that situation.
It's kind of hard when a character literally has a ball gag in her mouth every single time she's on camera.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's hard to say. I actually was almost expecting there to be a reveal where she was like, wait, I'm sorry, I said what? But what happens with them after that? So they end up
getting crowned prom king and prom queen. Because like he promises to be like more receptive to her needs,
responsive to her needs. But again, she's articulated
she's
none
really
of this,
more of a
so it's all very
character.
And has consistently been so as well. I'm just trying to remember what happened with them later on, because it's not like they stay together.
Princess Tinyfoot. I mean, partly, part of the reason why I don't care about this is I really don't like Sergeant Vatrid. I think he's one of the worst, ongoing characters, especially, I can't remember whether it's, like, this season or next season or the previous, like, where he spends the whole season and his like anti-pedophilia medication gives him breasts, and it's just like, no, guys, this is just not how to do anything.
I think he's probably the least popular character on the show, and it's amazing how much he's persisted.
He's not great. She does apparently dump him again in at the beginning of next season, so it didn't really last very long.
Yeah, I just want some sort of confirmation if like she really wanted that or not, because we just don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't know. But what we do know, Shoreleaf and the Alchemist are basically the only healthy couple. Now, granted, this episode is their meet cute, but I think they do just stick together from there on out. And it's because they communicate directly and they have something in common. They're both in the superhero, supervillain game, and they're both kind of parts of like traditional gay culture in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they're
nice.
Very cute together. I especially liked it when they kiss towards the end of the evening, and like Alchemist does the whole like lifting one leg, Hollywood thing.
Yeah. The other key piece, of course, is I just love, like, because we've talked about, like, is there a drink called the Rusty Venture? Well, definitely now there's a sex act, but no one can agree on the meaning of it. They just know that it's really disgusting. I enjoy how that becomes sort of a game of telephone through the episode, where they keep asking different people
like
what it means.
Colonel
And there's
Gentleman
really
and Watch and Ward, and it just like keeps ping-ponging around.
And like, the thing is, like, there's this whole world of Urban Dictionary defined sex acts that are like not really a thing. And like, it's sort of like a stunt or a joke of like somebody making up of what they think would be the most revolting thing they can think of. And it's, I don't know. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense that would be one of a Rusty Venture would be a joke, but also that it wouldn't really even be a thing.
It's
like a fake thing.
A different kind of like performative sexuality thing.
Yeah, it's like it's a stunt.
Yeah.
More than
similarly, one way that sort of romantic failure comes up in this episode is, having struck out, Rusty then decides to make a Spanish fly with a mutated radioactive fly, and like he and Billy have this like conversation about how, Spanish fly is a roofie, and that's a really fucked up thing.
Yeah. And also, like, the fly is angry because I took its wings off. Like, that's just fucking violent.
I mean, it's very, in character for someone who once built a joy can from the heart of an orphan. But it's still like, the whole thing is just like deeply fucked up from beginning to end. So finally, and like, I think this is what a lot of the episode is building to, we have Brock and Molotov as like a bad, codependent relationship that just needs to end.
Yeah, I mean, and it was dragging out, and I'm glad that they put an end to that one. You have this parallel of Brock chasing Molotov while the boys are trying to get to Triana. Like, it's literally cut together and stuff like that.
As much as like Brock derides the whole, if you love someone, set them free. It's like, dude, she's moved on. She has a boyfriend now. Like, move on with your life. So the next theme that we wanted to talk about, somewhat related to this whole idea of romantic failure, is this theme of like people whose own proms sucked trying to recapture the magic.
Which is a real phenomenon. Like, a lot of parents try to live out their high school glory days the way they wish they'd been through their kids, and it's really fucked up and pathetic. And these are adults who definitely missed on having the youth that they would have wanted, and so they're trying to project it onto the sons. And what's so funny is, like, the boys don't really care about those markers and those rituals.
Part of the reason is that, like, they weren't exposed to any of, like, they're weird clones who've grown up on a compound, and they know super science, and they don't really, because they're like incredibly homeschooled, they don't really have any like, way of evaluating any of this like cultural baggage that the older generation have. And, you have, Rusty, like, is trying to do a better job than his dad did of giving his kids a normal childhood. Prom is, like, as dumb as it is like an American adulthood ritual, or at least has been since, I actually did some research on this, pretty much just like the mid-20th century. Like, there were proms, in, like, the 1920s, but they don't really seem to have been as big a deal. This is really more like post-war 50s.
Post-war. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And, but he ends up doing a shitty job of it.
And they don't care. Yeah. Like, it's not what they wanted.
And of course, part of the reason that he does such a bad job is that, like, he's more focused on the fantasy of getting laid and, like, the fantasy of being, the homecoming king or whatever than, like, what his kids are actually into. Which is, like, yet another way in which he replicates his father's whole thing of like, you know, overbearing and negligent at the same time.
And you have this comparison with Sphinx, and there kind of being a high school reunion for hunter-gatherers who left OSI, and now he comes back.
Yeah,
It's
and, you know,
gang.
high school reunions have a very similar feel to proms. You know, they're also dances held in the school gym, right? And everyone's coming back, and they're, like, trying to, you know, recapture that nostalgia, but, like, it's never that good. You know, on the other hand, like, I feel like that is something of a transient phenomenon now, because, like, you know, with Facebook and other forms of social media, like, I'm still in contact with all of the, like, high school and college friends who I want to be in contact with. And I don't have to, like, go back to my high school hometown to, like, catch up. You know, I know what's happening in their lives.
That's true. I mean, yeah, it's all very mid-century, and that's was sort of one of and the '70s piece of it is also, you know, one of their other big obsessions, of course, of the show as well. You know, none of the music that they're playing is what Hank or Dean would have been asking for either. It's just what Pete and Billy liked when they were in college, but also sort of a little bit of like trying to perform as being a traditional DJ. But like, I don't really think that Hank and Dean have ever, until they're in New York, like I've not seen at this point in the show, neither of them had really expressed any interest in any particular music.
I mean,
anyway.
you know, Hank has his band, but like, I don't know if he, you know,
has he listened to other bands?
What access to? I mean, okay, he knows Led Zeppelin because of Brock. I think that's kind of about it.
Right.
Whereas, like, you know, I think that most of their, like, you know, Shallow Gravy's, like, aesthetic is driven by Dermot's weird, try-hard, you know, wannabe kind of thing.
Yeah. And he's the one who's actually a real young person, like living in the moment and age of the show.
Another sort of like prom thing that I don't really know why people do, and, you know, is like spiking the punch, right? Which, you know, like goes horribly right and then horribly wrong, you know, and it's sort of not clear, like, which would have been better outcomes.
Definitely not having everybody melt into flies and run around in horror. I also love that neither Hank, like Dressy's like, look, I made you both prom kings because this is a thing that has value and meaning to you that you know that I, your father, have bequeathed it to you, and they don't give a fuck. Of course they don't care.
The other theme that, like, you know, speaking about caring and not caring is this, like, theme of positivity and negativity. Like, you know, it goes into, like, the longer running theme in the show of, like, failure and coming to terms with failure. And in this case, it's, like, being okay with things being lame. Like, moving past the need to, like, for things to be cool and choosing to help instead.
Like, you have 21, you know, he'd been on his stereotypical revenge quest and in supervillainy, and he realizes that that's actually kind of embarrassing and isolating, and that maybe he'd like to actually hang out with people who are competent and do things with them, like the OSI guys are doing. It was kind of cool to have him being friends with, I keep wanting to say Shipwreck, but I mean Shore Leave. It would have been interesting, it would have been interesting to see actually have 21 go and join OSI.
He spends most of next season with Sphinx.
Oh, that's right.
But, like, eventually kind of, can't make a go of it and just sort of retreats back to what's comfortable.
And, you know, despite, like, really striking out by the norms of prom, Hank has a much more positive attitude, and he just tries to focus on friendship and rock music and have a good time and not try to hold himself to this, like, I don't know, fictional, culturally imposed standard of what his prom is supposed to be.
It's one of the things that gets really intense next season, because I think next season, is like the one where Dean starts like wearing a black speed suit and like dyes his hair black and gets very moody and teenagery, which is like, on the one hand, it shows that like he's actually becoming a teenager after being stuck as like a tween for however many years, but on the other hand, it's like, it's not a positive, it's like a way station, you kind of need to move past it.
Right. And I think also, I mean, do you want to talk about the radiation therapy, cancer treatments?
Sure. So,
rays?
Partly this is kind of like playing off Stan Lee's weird relationship with science. I mean, I could do a whole podcast about like what he thought magnets and magnetism did. Yeah, they're just amazing. How do they, Stan Lee, proto-juggalo. But, in this case, it's like, literally every time anyone gets exposed to radiation in, like, early Marvel, whether it's, like, the Fantastic Four and Cosmic Rays, or Peter Parker and the Spider, like, good things happen to you. It's not like, oh dear, you've got cancer. So, on the other hand, like, General Traster kind of has, like, a positive but kooky, like, take on, his whole situation, which is like, I may have incurable cancer, and I, sometimes think I'm a Hulk, but, I'm gonna shoot myself into space and let aliens fix me, because why not?
And he does get grabbed at some point, right? Yeah, he
shows up when they do the, like, what's it? Return... Yeah, Gargantua 2. Kind of... What was that even? It was like... It was sort of an interstitial two-parter. I don't even remember, like, what season that was technically part of.
Well, anyway. We see him as a frozen meteorite in space in the future. And another cool moment is, we talk about this a lot in our more recent work, but like, you have this reference of Dr. Venture and the Monarch being related here, when the Monarch gets a change of clothes from Vatran, and he says, "You're a size Doc," right? As in, you're a similar size to Doc, which he is. They are.
Yeah, they're
significant.
Both skinny redhead dudes.
So some more references we wanted to help folks see. The dance floor is literally the Saturday Night Fever dance floor from the movie Saturday Night Fever.
With the walking eye serving as disco ball.
Walking eyes are so cool. So we have, you can tell when this episode came out because Triana's boyfriend is the boy from Twilight. His name is Raven. It's so fucking perfect. And he's like the emo James Dean, or emo as one would have characterized it and portrayed it in the year 2010 or 2011. Not as we would have described it in the year 1998 or so, but we won't go down that path. It's just really strong physical resemblance they want you to see between him and
James
the actor who plays...
Oh, sorry,
Thank
Robert
you.
Pattinson.
Yes.
God damn, I apologize to the current Batman.
Yes. Just a spot on drawing of him. And I guess that's sort of like him being a character that's established as a romantic rival in another sort of teen fiction story makes sense, right? And we were talking about how telling it is that, which of the boys asks
Hank
if he's
does.
a cyborg? Hank, that makes sense, it's Hank. Yeah. And of course the show was like, no, he's not a cyborg, those are his crutches. But in reality, he is a cyborg, because any of us who use external devices are functionally
I
cyborgs.
literally have a computer-assisted
Glasses.
leg, that I have to plug in at night. I am a cyborg. Indeed.
They're very futuristic. And so it was interesting because he's like, no, he's not. But also it was like the boys are like, well, they live in a world where there's all kinds of very
it would be
high-tech
perfectly
cyborgs.
reasonable for them to assume that, given their weird.
But I totally
frame of
watched
reference.
that. Yeah. But I totally watched that and I was like, well, technically, according to the works of Donna Haraway, he would be considered a cyborg. Anyway, whatever. He's a little one-off character who I enjoyed. This episode was very, very full of G.I. Joe stuff.
Yeah, so, obviously, the OSI and Sphinx are stand-ins for G.I. Joe and Cobra, and they've got, this whole, at this point, 2 seasons worth of running gags about, Sphinx and OSI being, G.I. Joe and Cobra, but, complete with war crimes, and there's the whole business of the Pyramid Wars of 1987, which is very much peak G.I. Joe era
For the cartoon, yeah.
and the toys and all that.
I love the reveal that the reason why the Rusty Venture is potentially associated with being a mysterious sex act is because of Rusty's big fandom in the gay community. I love it was with Shore Leave and the Alchemist chatting your cartoon was huge in the gay community. We used to throw Rusty Venture parties in the Castro. We'd all wear striped tops and little shorts. How did you not know? Man, you're like a little Twinkie Cher, a ginger freaking Liza Minnelli. I love that Doc doesn't know that he's a camp icon. He's just unaware of this fact. And that these other characters have just totally embraced it. I realize I should probably explain the Castro to folks. The Castro is a neighborhood in San Francisco that began in its current guise at the end of World War II. It was America's first gayborhood, real gay neighborhood. And it became a place where sailors were disembarking because San Francisco is that big port town from after World War II, and developed as a gay neighborhood, a gay district. Hello, shore leave. Hello, sailors. And it's interesting, as the fashion look ubiquitous there in the late 60s and the 70s was became to refer to as the Castro clone look, which I guess if you guys are thinking about Tom of Finland might be the best way I could describe, but you also have this very traditional masculine, but over the top in ways that are just very butch and gay nonetheless. And it's lots of serious mustaches, which means Shore Leave totally fits in there.
The other thing that we wanted, in terms of references, so the Outrider, we already talked about how he's kind of the Phantom Stranger. He's also a little bit Solomon Kane, especially his giant hat is very Solomon Kane-esque.
Puritan. Solomon Kane being
the Robert E. Howard Puritan
yes,
swashbuckler
fighter,
and not so much in his attitude. He's kind of a slacker stepdad at this point. But also you should know an outrider is a kind of scout. It's a term for someone who rides ahead of an army to make sure that they're not walking into an ambush.
I like how he's just dispensing. He's the dad that you didn't ask for. He's just there dispensing advice that nobody's looking for. Some of the coded speech with hunter gatherers is who got, in case we didn't mention it already, is a Hunter S. Thompson metaphor for the actual journalist. He's saying Rando's got us on our bellies and he's reaching for the butter as code words and ouch, that's a reference to Last Tango in Paris, which as we have learned, in case anybody didn't know, the rape scene in that movie with Marlon Brando was the actress who was playing the woman in that scene wasn't told that scene was going to be performed, so she thinks that she's about to get raped, which is completely fucking evil. Yeah, it's definitely not a movie I would watch at this point, having
Yeah, it's sort
known
of
that
the
fact.
worst of the sort of like male auteur worship of the 70s, kind of curdling into just absolute toxic masculinity.
Yeah, another movie that gets a big shout out there is when when the boys are trying to plan their stunt to get Triana back. They're like, it's going to be like The Crow, which I guess that's Dermot
Yeah.
who must have said that, right? Because I couldn't believe the boys would have watched something that took place in the 90s. You know, I believe The Crow is the only movie that has a character who's a community organizer in it. It's true. That's his girlfriend who gets killed.
Yeah, probably.
So it was big in the 90s. People liked to associate it with goth culture, but it really wasn't goth. I will be the definitive judge of such matters. Although I did appreciate that it had a couple of good songs in the soundtrack.
So finally, we wanted to talk about like Dean's romantic gesture, which parallels the like moment in Say Anything when John Cusack's character like holds a boombox up over his head, and you know, to like say that he's sorry and win back the girl who dumped him.
He's playing In Your Eyes by Peter Gabriel.
Which, you know, as
He's sensitive.
which as like many, you know, we're not the first to like notice or like talk about the fact that like that, you know, moment which got like endlessly repeated and like referenced and played on and like adapted both in like rom-coms and other you know, properties, is like actually a very fucked up stalkery gesture, right? You know, she said, I don't want to have anything to do with you, and he violates her boundaries. That, you know, John Hughes, who like has this kind of famously problematic view on you know, these matters, like very much played a significant role in normalizing and like warping a lot of people's mentality about like what romantic relationships should be like and how you should behave if you want to like have one and begin one. You know.
Yeah. And I appreciate this show as sort of like, hey, that's fucked up and isn't going to work right.
Yeah, and
good on you. I also love Dermot saying goths are into spooky stuff, and so no, he doesn't say that. Sorry, Dean says goths are into spooky stuff, and he dresses up as a ghost because he was told that goths are into spooky stuff. And I just love that's like ghosts aren't sexy, vampires are sexy, and it's like you have this line about like what counts as like sexy horror and therefore like is goth adjacent, and what stuff is just doesn't really fit as a thing you would want to dress up as. But certainly wearing a white sheet is never a good decision.
Wear a sheet, get beat, as they say.
So speaking of music, which I guess we were, because I was beginning to talk about goth and I could do that for hours. One of the reasons that I just love Pete White is that Pete White and I understand each other. And like, I think Billy is complaining because Pete White is playing the Fun Boy 3 version of Our Lips Are Sealed instead of the Go-Go's. And he's saying is that, you know, the Go-Go's version is stale. And I have to say, Pete White is right. The Go-Go's version of Our Lips Are Sealed, nothing wrong with that song, but it is really played to death, whereas the Fun Boy 3 version is much less ubiquitous and therefore more interesting choice to play on the dance floor. Fun Boy 3 was the post-Madness spin-off group of like the ska band from the 80s, second wave ska. You should check them out. They're cool.
It is a...
You were saying that they...
I was going to say, it is
sorry,
a bit of a shame that we don't get to see their choreographed couples dance to Push It.
And I just totally made an ass of myself. I meant Fun Boy 3 being a spinoff from the Specials, not Madness. Yeah, I would have enjoyed any kind of choreographed dancing from them. I think they would have done a very good version of that. And that song is a classic, which they definitely could not have afforded. So we were talking about all the various generic versions of songs that Pete plays because, you know, it's expensive to get a good pastiche done. And the show has had a range of levels of success in the qualities of their pastiches. Like they had a really good Velvet Underground pastiche, like that episode. Their Zeppelin pastiches have been not so hot, mixed bag. So what
So
were you
I
thinking of
think one of
some
the
of the pastiches
songs
they did
is
here?
either supposed to be the Hustle or the Bee Gees, like the one that's like very clearly disco. Not entirely sure, just because it is just kind of a disco beat. There's also a conga line, which is like, I don't know.
Pretty, generic for a
Yeah,
bar mitzvah, a
exactly.
wedding, etc.
It's
But
like the electric
what I
slide. It's like
really
something that
enjoyed was,
large groups of people know
yeah.
how to do.
What I enjoyed also was a large quantity of a pretty good pastiche of Blue Monday by New Order. And it also kind of worked as being You Spin Me Right Round, by Dead or Alive. So you have a very, like, they understand their 80s synth pop is
Yeah.
what I'm saying. Which of course they do. Like Doc, like I mean, he was in a goth band. I hope folks are aware that Doc Hammer was in a goth band. And additionally, G.D. Thirlwell really understands, his actual composer of the show, really understands his
I actually own
references
his
there.
album of music from the show because it's just like it is
It's gorgeous.
a lot of fun just to put on while you're doing other stuff.
So the other thing that I love about them being such big music nerds is that they like really know things. So during this episode, I think it's like 24, is like complaining about, he's like, oh, why am I with Mr. Wendell from Arrested Development? And this whole, the band, not the TV show, the 90s hip hop group collective. And when he's saying that, I'm just like, that's not Mr. Wendell. That's Baba OJ, who was Arrested Development's spiritual advisor. And what I love about the Venture Brothers is that they know that. And they have later on, someone is like, what? That's not Mr. Wendell. Mr. Wendell's a character they write about. Baba OJ was in the band. I'm like, yes, exactly. One of these is a character from the music video, and the other of them is was the band's spiritual advisor. And it was an actual, like, cool old dude. So one of these is a fictional person. The other one of these is a real person. They're not the same person. These are different elderly black men. And like the Venture Brothers show knows that. And so like, the whole time when I'm like, but that's not, they know that's part of the joke.
I was going to say, that's
it.
very 21 and 24. Like whenever they make music references, I mean, I'm thinking especially the wedding two-parter where they're talking about Bowie albums. And like 21's favorite Bowie album is a best of compilation.
Yeah, yeah. Which is like an insult to my sensibilities. But it's true, they're always talking past each other like that. Because you know that the writers are the guys who are like actually correct about the music, and they have to have these conversations with people who are not as correct about the music. And I relate to that struggle greatly, and how frustrating it is when other people are wrong all the time. Anyway, you were saying?
We also get Shore Leave referencing South Pacific.
Which, of course, like, he's into musicals. From you're going to wash that man right out of your hair, he says, like, from South Pacific.
It's kind of overdetermined, but that is sort of Shore Leave's shtick, is that, like, he's not just a gay super spy, but he's, like, a very classic gay culture super spy.
Yeah. And that is an expression that people use. Like, I have heard people say, wash that man right out of your hair, as like, it's like a thing.
Yeah. And
it's
also,
not like a fake expression.
It's a good joke because like Sphinx constantly brainwashes people to like.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. There you go.
So finally, in talking about music, I want to talk about the one non-generic song that they play right at the end of the episode. So, Like a Friend, a song about a relationship that went bad, like clearly Brock and Molotov, they were like thinking of the lyrics as they're writing their scenes, because one of the lyrics to the song is like, goes, you're like a body hidden in the trunk, which, the limousine trunk is like a whole, running motif in this episode. And it's also echoed by Triana when she says, you're not acting like a friend.
What's so funny to me is I'm so used to this show just using pastiches that I'm listening to this scene and I'm like, oh, they did a really good job with that Pulp pastiche. Wow. Like, it didn't occur to me that it was actually the Pulp song.
So
Did not
this
even occur to
song
me.
made up like an enormous proportion, not just of the episode budget, but of the season budget. And it's funny that you mistook it for a really good pastiche, because I confused it with Disco 2000, another Pulp song about a relationship that never happened. Which like really fits in with the Dean Triana thing. Because that was also, a relationship of, like, geographic convenience that just never went anywhere.
Totally good. Yeah, that's totally right on. And folks should listen to both of these songs because they're actually really excellent.
I'll tell you what's really weird, though. The music video for Like a Friend is specifically a music video for the Ethan Hawke, Gwyneth Paltrow version of Great Expectations. A story that is famously about a toxic, not quite relationship, between a boy and a girl.
I mean, but that's also like the most 1997 like thing.
Yeah,
you
it was
could
not a
possibly
good version of Great
have it be.
Expectations.
But like that, it's Pulp doing this song for it is just amazing. For Great Expectations, and like Gwyneth Paltrow, like what could possibly be more late 90s than Gwyneth Paltrow?
Before her whole kind of goop renaissance. But I have like one last bit of trivia about Like a Friend, which is, and this is like different worlds colliding. Jarvis Cocker, the lead singer / songwriter for Pulp, found out about the song being featured on Venture Brothers, and in a concert live from Radio City Music Hall, he dedicated a song, his like rendition of Like a Friend to Public and Hammer, and did the whole Go Team Venture thing from the stage. And it's like a crying goddamn shame that the YouTube video of that performance is no longer available because it's 8 years old.
Damn it. Yeah, who took that down?
Probably the record label.
That is so cool. Like, I always love... Yeah, it's, it's sort of like, I really wish I knew that Bowie knew that he was, a super deity practically in the Venture Brothers cartoon, like if he'd had the opportunity to find that out. And so you wonder, like, well, it's good that at least Pulp knew that, like, it actually appreciated the show in return. That's a lot of fun. Well, that's what we have for you guys today. If you'd like us to go and do another old Venture Brothers episode, tweet me. I'm at ELANA_Brooklyn. That's ELANA_Brooklyn. And tell us what episode you'd like us to cover. We also have some really exciting stuff coming up. I sat down for a lengthy 2-part interview with classic comics artist and writer Jerry Ordway. Like, this guy inked Infinite Crisis. Okay, Crisis on Infinite Earths. I mean, both of those things. He's like the reason why anybody cared about Shazam until the movie came out. And he's a wonderful dude. And I have some other interviews coming up as well. And I appreciate folks for bearing through this slow process of getting some new episodes up we've had. But thank you, Stephen, for helping me make this happen. I appreciate you so much. And where can folks find your work on the internet?
On Twitter at Stephen Atwell. You can find me at WordPress and on Tumblr at Race for the Iron Throne, where I'm trying to, do my own bit to help us get through these long, comicless weeks.
Yeah. And I would be happy to, we're going to also get to talk about some older comics as well soon on the show, by the way. I have a very exciting special guest going to join me to talk about classic Daredevil. And we have Alyssa Chartier, comic artist of November, and she worked on an Unstoppable Wasp, is going to be coming on too as well. So thank you guys, and see you on Graphic Policy. We're on every single podcast platform. Please like, rate, and review. It really does make a difference for us. And thank you to David Levin, my brother, for being an awesome producer. And as we like to say, keep it geeky.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games. you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.